Employment contracts. The purpose of this contract is to set the terms of your employment and what the company wants you to do for the company, and what the company will do for you in return. Contractual obligations with the games industry about inventions and about not competing with the company during the term of employment. Collaboration agreements. A collaboration agreement allows the two or more companies to create a contract of ownership and what they are allowed to use. For example, the Lego games are created by Warner Brothers and TT Games, Traveller's Tales, so they can dictate what goes in the animation of the game, but the creators of the film or franchise can dictate whether the game is allowed to be published. For example, Lego Lord of the Rings is a collaboration between Lego, Lord of the Rings and TT Games. This means Lego owns the rights to using the Lego figures. Lord of the Rings, owned by a separate company, can dictate whether the quality of the game is good enough to improve the franchise's feel. Development agreements. A development agreement is a contract that spells out the terms of the development deal. Terms. This part of the agreement spells out how much the publishers will pay the developer for how much time the developer has to develop the game, and also the developers must give suggestions to budget for equipment. Ownership. It's important to clarify whether the publisher owns the IP or the developers own it. For if the publisher owns the IP address, then he can sell the idea on to different companies. Warranties. The developing company has to swear that it won't use anybody else's source code, and the publishing company has to swear that it has the right to ask the developer to create this particular game. License agreement. When a publisher wants to make a game about a movie or something, the publisher and the movie IP owner must create a contract spelling out the terms of the license. What's being licensed? The contract probably specifies that the publisher only has the right to make a game that works on a certain game console, such as the Xbox 360 or the PlayStation 3. Territory. The contract specifies what part of the world the publisher's game will be published in. Publishers always want worldwide rights, of course, but licensors often charge them more for that. Term. The contract probably doesn't run out forever. Usually they only last 5 years or so. NDA and confidential agreements. Non-disclosure agreements, disclosure agreements and confidentiality agreements are pretty much the same thing. One party, in order to do business with the other party, has to spell a secret legal issues. Regulatory agreements. A regulatory requirement is when a licensing agreement company, for example PEGI, will rate the game and come out to a conclusion. For example, you may create a game and send it to PEGI, to the PEGI office, to be scrutinised and rated, and they may send it back with a rating you're unhappy with. stating that it is too gory and violent for a 15 and must be an 18 plus. This does not go with the game's plan, so you might have to get rid of some of the violence and gore which Peggy will have specified. Regulatory compliance describes the goal that organisations aspire to achieve in their efforts to ensure that they are aware of and take steps to comply with relevant laws and regulations. Subcontracting. This is where the company will hire more people outside the original contract to do a certain job, usually called freelancing. NDA and confidentiality agreements. Non-disclosure agreements, disclosure agreements, and confidentiality agreements are pretty much the same thing. One party, in order to do business with the other party, has to tell a secret of some kind. For example, they could tell them about a new technology or process for making games, and has to tell this secret to the other party. The other party agrees not to disclose this information, or damage may be inflicted on the first party's name. In such an event, the first party could take action in a court of law against the second party. Naming conventions. A naming convention is a group of the staff talk about what the name of the game should be, or even a character. Outsourcing. Outsourcing is where the company may send some of its employees to go to another company. Working to a brief. A lot of the time, the teams in the company will work to a number of briefs, such as an animation team may get the first brief to design and animate the main character. The brief will include what the character's movement needs to be, whether it has to be smooth and precise, or if it is a big character, which must have messy strikes and big swings of his weapon. Copyright. The copyright law stops people designing a new game taking the name of a person in a different game or a game's title. Intellectual property. Rights are when someone who comes up with the idea owns the rights to it. The company would probably put in the contract who owns the rights, depending if you work for the company or with them as a freelance. Whether you own the rights or you don't dictates whether you can sell on the ideas and who owns percentages of the profit. PEGI, Pan-European Game Information. PEGI is a rating company which looks at games and play through them to check on their violence content and if they use bad language not suitable for children. PEGI can even control whether or not the game is allowed to come out for people to buy. The people at PEGI will review a game and dictate what age range it should be for. If the game's developers want it to be a 15 and PEGI say it is an 18, PEGI will give suggestions to changes that need to be made, whether that's taking information out or changing the language used. British Board of Film Classification, BBFC, is not usually for the games industry, although sometimes it is on the box. Why? The reason is the game may have video content or cutscenes in it. Also, many games nowadays have trailers to try and get people to get the game out to the people. These game trailers need to be rated. The rating system is pretty much the same as PEGI, although they are looking at different things. For example, they look at language and profanities, gore, but also graphic, nudity, or sexual content. Franchising. This is when a company will try and make a game including existing characters. For example, the Lego Lord of the Rings games have to look really nice and neat to show off the different parts of the game. So they basically have to make the two companies look good. They cannot make the game where the character Aragorn is weak and scared. Equally, they cannot make the Lego franchise look bad by showing blocks not fitting or in bad quality. Licensor. A licensor will look through the set contracts and see what can be changed around for use in the employment contract. Also, they will look through the agreements contracts between companies to see what their boundaries are and what they can get away with using. The licensor will also dictate what can be added to the employment contracts and who owns the IP address. Health and safety policy. There are not very many things a gaming company can do in the way of safety, but their employees are staring at a computer screen for long periods of time a day, and sometimes need a break from this. So the companies will set break times for them to stop looking at their screens and let their eyes rest and go outside to fresh air. Also, they may even give them free eye tests every so often, monthly or yearly, to try and ensure they are not doing permanent damage to their eyes. Ethical requirements. Games are usually accused of promoting violence when there is shootings around the globe with the people involved in playing video games. Many people will blame the companies and their aggressive games, although this might be the case with a small amount being minutely influenced by them. The video game companies have ethical requirements to stick to, such as trying to avoid promoting aimless violence or avoiding putting racist remarks in the game to stop violence and racism in the real world. Professional bodies. The Entertainment and Leisure Software Publishers Association, ELSPA. The ELSPA goal was to establish a specific and collective identity for the interactive leisure software industry across the European community. In 1994, ELSPA was responsible for introducing the video games ratings to the UK. ELSPA was the first voluntary age rating system. They changed from a focus on box products publishers to a more inclusive approach to all types of video game. They first started rating games in 1989. They advised parents and rated games for people to know how violent the games were or what language it used, e.g. if there is gore, sexual references or explicit language. IGDA. Game development is a bona fide profession depending on the skills of talented individuals. As development professionals, we expose conduct that is honourable and ethical and beneficial to the profession, the industry and society at large. To promote the growth of our industry and the growth of creative endeavours, to ensure the professional and standard of work environment for all development and publicly established and communicate our standards as media professionals. That was a quote from the IGDA website, which states their code of conduct and motto. Women in games. Give a voice to women and the men in the games industry and in games education with interests in supporting and encouraging the role of women in the games industry. 1. Support and research into games culture, games education, games industry, and games technologies, and other games-related areas especially, but not exclusively, with reference to the experience of women playing, developing and responding to games, and game culture. 2. Provide networking opportunities for women and men working in the games industry and researching games. BAFTA. BAFTA holds an annual award ceremony for the best and most entertaining TV shows and films, which are televised every year, although they also do a game section. This ceremony influences most gamers because if a BAFTA award is given to a game developers or individual game, then it has to obviously pass lots of critics and scrutiny. This means it is one of the best games of the century or the year. MEF, the Mobile Entertainment Forum. Promote small mobile game manufacturers and try giving them a chance to become one of the top rated or most popular games on the App Store. They also recently created a chart for the first ever US sales for mobile games. They also do charts for ringtones. This gives a great opportunity for people to see and hear different game titles they would have never seen otherwise in usual circumstances.